food systems are highly efficient, but they are not sustainable. They contribute to biodiversity loss, pollution of soil, air and water, as well as climate change. How can we restore nature while guaranteeing our food security? That's what we'll be looking at in this episode. Normandy, in the north of France. Here, levels of chemical pesticides, herbicides and fertilizers remain high. Europe's objective is to halve their use by 2030. I chose to meet with conventional farmers who have already done it, like Emmanuel. This former follower of intensive farming has turned to agroecology.
Traditionally, we grow wheat after flax. I don't do that. I grow rapeseed. It's a plant that will capture nitrogen in the autumn, so it does not leak into the water table. And this way, I recover nitrogen for my rapeseed, so I don't have to apply as much chemical nitrogen myself. It's a win-win. I started out with a very intensive system. In fact, it's easy to implement. It was based on a lot of fertilizers and chemicals, with technical results that weren't necessarily up to scratch. So I asked myself a lot of questions about how we could do things differently. What's going to force us to move much faster is the climate crisis, the loss of biodiversity, and the third element is the energy crisis.
Vincent also treats his fields half as much. He prefers to observe them. He has replanted hedges, introduced new species, and favours complementary crops.
What made me think is that I have friends and relatives who have had health problems related to phyto products. I think it's also an approach that my children like. My eldest is a beekeeper, so bees obviously concern me. And my second son works for the French Office for Biodiversity, so he likes to see that I'm protecting his environment, his father's environment. He's proud of his father.
Changing the way we produce is a priority for Europe, but it's complicated. A major European framework law for sustainable food systems should soon place nature restoration at the heart of all agricultural policies. This agronomist who accompanies Vincent and Emmanuel told me public authorities have the responsibility to immediately encourage the transition to other models.
The economic demonstration we've been doing with this group for the past 10 years is that they're not losing money and that the gain is in the common goods. But for other people, since there's no economic surplus, they don't make the change. In any case, this way of producing cannot last because we can't renew chemical active ingredients at the speed that would be necessary given the emergence of inefficiencies and resistances.
Some phytosanitary products are indeed less and less effective, but they're less useful if we improve resilience and biodiversity in nature. That's according to agronomist Christian Wieg.
Pesticides are not inputs. The more you use, the better it gets, when in fact you only need pesticides if you have disease pressure. And so if you have more biological regulation, you'll need fewer pesticides because you'll have more natural protection.
The positive effects of restoring ecosystems can be seen in Charles's lands. This French permaculture pioneer passes on the knowledge he's acquired on his small organic farm, which is inspired by the complexity of nature.
In fact, there are what you call ecosystem services. These are all the services that nature provides free of charge and that enable us humans to live. These include the creation of fertility and the pollination of plants, as well as the self-regulation of diseases and pests. More than 10 scientific research programs have been carried out on this farm. The first major study lasted 4 years and showed that we produced an average of €55 worth of vegetables per square metre grown entirely by hand. That's over 10 times more than organic market gardening with a tractor. The fertility of plots that are intensively gardened increases very quickly. And the other good news is that it frees up to 9/10 of the land for planting trees, digging ponds, raising animals. So the same amount of land is both much more natural and much more productive.
Charles's farm remains an exception. More than half the land in Europe is in poor condition, and that's why a major European law on soil monitoring was proposed this summer. To understand what's at stake, I went to Northern Europe. Here we are in Helsinki. It's early and we're going to join a group heading for the Finnish countryside to discover regenerative agriculture and its benefits for the soil and the Baltic Sea.
Hello.
An environmental protection association has invited me to a workshop on a pilot farm where the issues of reducing pollution, protecting the climate and restoring biodiversity are intimately linked. Owners Sara and Ilkka work with scientists to regenerate land damaged by intensive farming.
Biodiversity.
This worm shows that there is a good soil structure. This is very positive when you find these.
One of our priorities is to protect the Baltic Sea. Nutrient discharges have severely depleted its oxygen content.
It's already one of the most polluted seas in the world. That means that there's a lot of excess nitrogen and phosphorus in the sea, and that comes from agriculture and forestry.
Yeah, and if you want to prevent the runoffs from the fields, you have to have the proper soil structure. And how do you make the soil structure? You have to have as much carbon in the soil as it's possible to build the ecosystem back to the fields what it was decades ago.
To rebuild ecosystems, we also really need to limit land disturbance, such as intensive ploughing.
Shake this a bit. If the soil is not in a good shape, you lose a lot of soil also, and with the soil, the nutrients. And you would like to use the nutrients on the field to grow food. And then if you lose this, you have to put more on.
The other good news is that life is carbon. So the more life there is underground, the less carbon there is in the atmosphere. These technologies make it possible to measure its presence in the soil.
How much carbon is there in this soil?
Maybe 2% here on the top layer. You need the roots to get the carbon there.
So you can improve carbon sequestration by changing the way you manage your field, right?
Exactly, yes. And the importance of this is similar to increasing the carbon sink capacity of forests. If we were able to globally start using these more regenerative agricultural methods, I think that could help us by removing like a third of what we need to remove from the atmosphere.
We end this episode in the nearby forest. Participants in the Regenerative Agriculture workshop were treated to a concert under the pine trees. See you soon on the road to green.